Do I Have to Love Everyone? A Valentine's Day Sermon by the Reverend Douglas Taylor, Part 1. Yes. Part 2. Yes, because love will keep us together. And love is a many splendored thing, and love makes the world go round, and all we need is love, and love hurts. And Valentine's Day has come upon us as the ultimate hallmark holiday, celebrating the romantic fancy that we call love. I read somewhere that roughly 145 million cards will be exchanged this coming February 14th. One could almost suggest that we, as a culture, are love-obsessed. The origin of our modern Valentine's Day comes from the Roman festival of Lupercalia, a day in mid-February when each young man in town drew lottery for the name of a young woman who would become his sexual companion for the next year. Around 500 CE, Pope Galasiv decided that that was not a good custom and swapped the Lupercalia festival for the feast day of a minor Christian saint. This was a common practice used to win over the local pagans. So instead of drawing the name of a young woman, the men were supposed to draw the name of a Christian saint whom they would emulate for the coming year. For the life of me, I can't imagine how the Christians were so successful using strategies like this. They must have been experts at the hard sell, especially considering the full legend of the saint that the church chose to host that day. Saint Valentine was a priest in the 3rd century, or it may be a composite of several priests. The Emperor Claudius had outlawed marriage for young men at that time because he wanted to conscript them into the military instead. The priest, Valentine, continued to marry these young couples in secret. Discovered, he was sent to jail and sentenced to death for disobeying the emperor. The legend continues that he fell in love with the jailer's daughter, and he wrote her a note and he signed, "From your Valentine," prior to his beheading on February 14th, 270 CE. Then, over 200 years later, this defiant priest who lost his head helping young lovers is enlisted as the poster boy to rein in promiscuous habits of young lovers. And so our modern Valentine's Day has gravitated away from a day to emulate saints, but not entirely back to that original pagan custom either. Arguably, we strive on this day to emulate Saint Valentine, I suppose. It has settled into our culture as a day of rejoicing romantic love. We teach our children, as Blanchard demonstrated in our reading, that indeed we need to give a Valentine's card to everyone. But is this suggesting that we are to affect a romantic love for everyone we know? That would be ridiculous. You don't need a degree in humanities to know what a disaster that would be. That can't possibly be what is suggested. And perhaps this word love is too broad a word to use with the assumption of clarity. Love is often misused and misunderstood. A friend once suggested we ban the word from the pulpit because it has grown meaningless and impotent through excessive exhibition. Indeed, this is a common practice among Unitarian Universalists. Great words like God and peace and love can often be overused and misused and worn out to the point of rather becoming cliche or even idolatry. And one remedy is to throw the word away for a while. Let it cool off. And then maybe later pick it up, dust it off, discover it again and its depth of power. So allow me to do a little dusting. What first excited me about preaching on the topic of love again was a scientific article in the National Geographic. It was from 15 years ago about the biochemistry of love. The description reads, "Scientists are discovering that the cocktail of brain chemicals that sparks romance is totally different from the blend that fosters long-term attachment." This is another area of study where the hard sciences of biology, chemistry, and physics offer corroborating evidence for what the soft sciences of psychology and sociology have been saying for decades, and which theology and philosophy have been saying for centuries, perhaps. The article begins with the story of anthropologist Helen Fisher, who is, quote, looking for love quite literally with the aid of an MRI machine. She and her colleagues look for couples who have recently fallen in love. They pop one of them into the MRI machine and show them a neutral photograph and then a photo of their sweetie. Then the scientists watch to see which parts of the brain light up. For the record, that would be the ventral tegmental area and the caudate nucleus. These scientists note that the madly in love area of the brain is linked to the reward centers and the pleasure centers. A lot of dopamine spreads out from those spots. Thus, falling in love is a lot like an exciting amusement park ride. But be warned, the figurative roller coaster can make you sick, same as the literal roller coaster. Another breakthrough demonstrating this is found in the work of Donatella Maraziti, a professor of psychiatry in Italy. Professor Maraziti has been studying what she calls the biochemistry of lovesickness. Not surprisingly, she found similarities in the serotonin neurotransmitters and the chemical profile of both love and of obsessive-compulsive disorder. So I can't stop thinking about you. Night and day, you are the one. Only you can make my dreams come true. Yeah. Having a crush on someone comes out of your neurotransmitters like OCD. So that is interesting, but the best stuff came later in the article. While novelty triggers dopamine in the brain, thus feelings of attraction, it is a different chemical entirely that stimulates attachment. Oxytocin is the hormone that promotes a feeling of connection and bonding. Oxytocin is released in abundance when a mother nurses her infant, when you give or receive a massage, when a couple makes love. Attraction and attachment happen in different parts of the brain and with different sets of hormones. The chemicals in the brain that conspire to bring you together are not the same ones that conspire to keep you together. So far, this indicates that there are at least two forms of love expressed in the biochemical levels of brain function. Typically, a serious philosophical or theological exploration of different forms of love will consider at least three forms of love, and the three categories are typically developed to follow the three significant Greek words that are generally translated as love: eros, philia, and agape. Romantic or sexual love was called eros. This is easily linked with that production of dopamine and serotonin. Friendship in the modern Greek is still philia, which in ancient Greek denoted a love of friends and family and community, distinguished by loyalty and familiarity. Certainly, this sounds like that bond-strengthening love that is associated with oxytocin production in the brain. Well, that leaves me wondering if they could perhaps find the biochemical signature of agape love. Like which neurotransmitters are firing in the Dalai Lama's brain or in Thich Nhat Hanh's brain? Which biochemicals flooded the brains of Mother Teresa and Martin Luther King Jr.? Agape is a type of love where the object to be loved does not need to possess any particular qualities such as beauty or familiarity. It's unconditional love. The New Thayer Greek to English lexicon of the New Testament describes agape this way: to love, to be full of goodwill and exhibit the same, to have a preference for and regard for the welfare of others, of the benevolence which God, in providing salvation for men, was exhibited by sending his Son to them and giving him up to death, of the love which is in Christ, pouring human salvation to undergo suffering and death. Those theological pieces are there as well, of course. When I was in seminary, I had a Methodist professor of New Testament say to this class of mostly Methodist Christians that the difference between Unitarian Universalists and most Christians is that Christians focused on Jesus' death and resurrection, while the Unitarian Universalists focused on Jesus' life and teachings. The teachings of Jesus. In particular, the ethical sayings found in the Sermon on the Mount, for example, have stirred the souls of Unitarian Universalists through the centuries. It's in the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew that Jesus says to love your enemies. He says, if you only love those who love you, what good is that? The Greek word in these verses is agape. Not eros, not philia. The most famous discourse on agape love is found in Paul's first letter to the congregation in Corinth. Love is patient, he writes. Love is kind. Love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. In this letter from Paul, the word he uses is agape. It's the same word the gospel writers used in writing down Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. Of course, Jesus spoke Aramaic, not Greek, so I can't tell you that Jesus was steering at this particular interpretation of love, but in fairness, the context of Jesus' words about loving our enemies does fit this Greek concept of love as defined by the word agape. Here's the real hint. Agape love is not a feeling. It's a choice. Perhaps that is why we haven't and will not uncover a biochemical signature for agape love. It's a choice. It's a decision. If it were a feeling, it would have a hormone linked to it. Instead, it's a choice to be concerned for the well-being of others, to treat them with dignity and respect. A person may be difficult, obnoxious, and completely undeserving, but you can still choose to offer this form of love to them by extending respect and a wish for that person's well-being. With a modern global perspective, we might translate agape using a Buddhist concept of loving kindness. While loving kindness is not synonymous with agape, both carry that tone of unconditional regard. And that, I believe, is the aspect of love we are called to offer to everyone. Are there difficult people in your life? Are there folks you find, as Blanchard said, irritating, obnoxious, mean, aggravating, anxiety-producing, hostile, difficult, stupid, disturbing, or some alarming combination of the aforementioned attributes? Perhaps there are people from where you work or go to school, or even in your extended family, that would fit in this category for you. Maybe there are certain people who are politicians or celebrities whom you have taken a particular distaste. Perhaps some of them are members of this congregation with you. Who would you balk at sending a Valentine's Day card to? Do you hate anybody? Our faith calls us to treat all people with compassion, to recognize the inherent dignity of each person, and to discern the ways in which our individual lives are interdependent with all life, including the life of that irritating, obnoxious, mean, aggravating, anxiety-producing, hostile, difficult, stupid, and disturbing person that we have to deal with. This largely stems from our Universalist heritage that says we are all accepted. We are all loved. Even those irritating, obnoxious, mean, aggravating, anxiety-producing, hostile, difficult, stupid, and or disturbing people. Especially them, if for no other reason than you may be one of them according to another person's perspective. Universalism, since its inception, has rejected not only the eternal punishment of hell, but also the reason for such a punishment in the first place, the concept of original sin. Hosea Ballou, an early leader in the Universalist denomination, said that the consequences of sin are manifest in this life alone, that hell is not a place of punishment, but a state of rebellion against God and against the unity of humans and God. The interpretation and this implication here is that we choose to make of life a heaven or hell. This is not exactly free will, as the Unitarians would have it, but it does leave in the hands of humanity the capacity to respond to the love of God by loving one another or by making of this life a hell. We hold that power and that responsibility. When you withhold your Valentine from some people, you are in rebellion against the unity of humans and God. You're in rebellion against the interdependent web of existence. You're in rebellion against the nature of life. You're in rebellion against your better self. Whatever theological framework you need me to set on this, the outcome is still going to be the same. Yes, you do have to love everyone. That's part of the work. We have the capacity and the responsibility to respond to God's love by loving one another. That is what life is all about. To further the human venture, to help each other and all life to become the beloved community. So look through that list of names. I know you've begun while you've been listening to me preach. Make a choice. Find one that really is bugging you and send them a Valentine's card. Give it a try. Take that step toward ushering in the beloved community. In a world without end, may it be so.